government response to me, and I didn't look any further. I believe there are no witnesses. I'm a family of military background. We believe our government. We know our government. We trust our government. My father was the ultimate patriot. I didn't look any further. There were no witnesses. Judge Gaydon sends me a letter, Easter of this year. Says, I have information about your father who might be alive. I say to myself, another one. My father's dead. But I call him up because this time I'm interested. I want to follow up the leads, and he's got basically information which I didn't think could come from just anybody about my father. He's got my father's Social Security number, he's got my father's birth date, he's got his correct rank, and he's got his name, Albro Lundy, which is as unique as his Social Security number. And besides, he's dead. I said, where is this information coming from, and why would somebody bring information about Albro Lundy out? He's dead. No one would be so stupid as to try and pull a hoax. He's dead. I better follow this up a little more, because I couldn't understand where that information came from. So I start writing. Actually, what happened was, a little while after that, my mother got information from the government, the very same information that Judge Gaydon had, sent to us in a Twix. And in that Twix, it had a cover letter, and Chuck Trowbridge was the person that wrote the cover letter, and he said, disregard this information, it really is nothing but a dog tag report. And my mother didn't look any further. She took that and threw it in the trash. My father's dead. She threw it in the trash. I said, Mother, I'd really have liked to have seen that. I had to get my own copy. I called up and got a copy, and I read through it again, and I said, well, dog tags don't have birth dates on it. Chuck, how could that be? Why did you call this a dog tag report? Chuck hasn't responded to me as far as that's concerned, but who's Chuck? Chuck Trowbridge. He testified here earlier. I'm sorry to be so familiar. No pun intended there. I said, well, I'm going to read the report itself, because it was basically a letter purportedly written for my father with this information. And I didn't believe much of the information on it, but I didn't know where that correct information had come from. And that was very unusual to me. And then I saw something at the bottom of the letter that amazed me. It said thumbprints. Now, I didn't get the original. I got a transcription, but it said thumbprints. Nowhere. Is this from the judge? No, this is from the DIA. And nowhere in the cover letter that said disregard this did it mention these thumbprints. Nowhere. And so I called up and I said, there's thumbprints on the original? Have you checked? Have you checked my father's thumbprints? I think we can get rid of this right now. Because to be honest with you, I didn't tell my mother anything about the investigation I was doing. I opened the case as a case in my law office, and I was going to disprove it because my father was dead. This was a hoax. And I spent literally thousands and maybe tens of thousands of dollars worth of man-hours trying to disprove this case. I didn't want to bring it back into my family. My father was dead, and I knew what this would do to our family if I brought it up again. 3.5 months worth of investigation before I told anybody in our family about this. You know what I was told when I asked about the fingerprints? Have you checked the fingerprints? Now, this has been in the DIA's hands now for 5 months. They say, we don't do that unless the next of kin requests it. That was the response. I said, well, I'm next of kin. And they said, no, you're not. I said, well, what do you call me? Well, no, you're not next of kin. Your mother's next of kin, so we had to go through a little formality. But I requested it, and I got an answer back. There are no fingerprints in your father's file. There are no fingerprints to check on him. And I said, my father had top secret security clearance, nuclear, intelligence. He was ROTC, went to regular. How could there not be fingerprints in my father's file? And then I looked through the file very carefully. I'd like to draw your attention to this next blow-up. And it says right there, there's a letter in his file. It says, attached are forms and fingerprint card on the above subject.
But look at the date on it.
Right. But they don't throw anything away.
No, but
right. That doesn't make any difference when the date is. This 22nd of December, 1954. That means my father was fingerprinted and the card was in his file. And then more importantly, if you look down there on the bottom, it says National Agency check is completed on this individual. That means the fingerprints were good. That means Henry card classifications had been done. That means my father's fingerprints had been checked out, and the government had a set of fingerprints in his file. That very file I was looking at, much to my amazement, when I flipped it over to find the attachment, there was no fingerprint card attached, nor were there any Henry classification cards. I can't understand that. I still can't understand that. It's absolutely unbelievable. This is a smoking gun letter that there is cover-up in our government. It couldn't possibly happen if there wasn't, because guess what? Somebody had to pull that card from his file. It just doesn't magically disappear. They just forgot to take out the cover letter.
Well, we're going to inquire when the folks come back next week.
Moving on to the photo itself.
Mike can say, we need to do that. We need to try to wrap this up. I'm not trying to cut you off, but I understand.
I felt that was probably the most important aspect with regard to the government's response.
Have you ever asked them about that?
I have letters.
Okay, about the fingerprint thing, though.
Oh, right.
And their answer to you is what?
There are no fingerprints on record.
No, but as to why? As to what happened?
We do not know. We're very sorry.
They don't
That's
know.
one of the most embarrassing things I can tell you. Carl Ford, if I can quote Carl Ford.
Is it beyond the realm of possibility that it might be incompetence and not?
And all
well,
three men?
one,
I'll just ask you the
two,
question.
Three.
All three of them, and they were highly cleared for security.
And just so happens that there's pictures of all three. And legitimate pictures, that's what I want to get to. Because I did photo analysis. Before I would even take this to my mother, before I would even bring it up, I made sure in my own mind that my father was alive. And let me put it this way, that I had enough evidence that somebody would now have to prove to me he's dead. Okay, and I think that's what our government should be doing right now, is should be saying to the Vietnamese, you prove to us he's dead. You prove to us all of these guys who are missing are dead. It's not our responsibility to prove they're alive, because we know they're alive. We knew they were alive. And that's my father. This analysis, I had a 16-point analysis done. There are 16 facial features. And if you saw the overlay, it's obviously recognizable. But 16 facial features of my father on one to the other. It's him. There's nobody that's disputed that. The only people have been the DIA who said they're inconclusive. They don't have a result. Inconclusive is all they've said as far as it being him. But I went to my mother July 5th probably, and I said, Mother, I've got information. You need to know about it. I think now is the time you should hear it. And she didn't want to hear any information. She just wanted to see the photograph. And I said, let me brace you. She just wanted to see the photograph. Minutes later, after she saw the photograph, she said, that's your father.